Hello, this is Georgina Rose, part-time esoteric content creator and part-time surfer of the aethers. And this is the Darling channel. We discuss mysticism, religion, the occult, culture, philosophy, and every heterodox ideology under the sun. Now, this video is going to be a more theological video. I typically focus on esotericism and mysticism in my sort of main channel videos, but this question is something that I think is one of the most essential questions to answer if you are going to be involved with the esoteric in any capacity. And that would be the age-old theological debate that has been raging for thousands of years. And that would be, is monotheism or polytheism true? Now, these distinctions seem really simple, right? Monotheism is one god. Polytheism is multiple gods. But per usual, what you're told in like a religion class is a little oversimplified, and there's a lot more nuance going on in reality. The truth is, there are a lot of different beliefs within these two categories because both of these categories encompass a lot of religions and a lot of schools of thought that completely disagree with each other. And so I would argue that a monotheist versus polytheist may be a little less dichotomous than people assume. That's something that I end up saying a lot because this is the reality. Religion is complicated and weird and not as simple as people think it is. We like to oversimplify things. So we're going to talk about what monotheism is, what polytheism is, all the ideas in between, and all the different sort of camps. Of course, I'm sure I'm going to miss something because it's a YouTube video, so save your long, lengthy comment about how I'm a neophyte or whatever. Anyways, we're going to start with polytheism. So polytheism, in its simplest form, is the belief in more than one god. But the thing is, there's a lot of different ways people are polytheist. Like a lot. I think the biggest sort of distinction between the two that I want to get out of the gate would be hard polytheism versus soft polytheism. Now, hard polytheism is the belief that all of these gods exist, or at least more than one, right? A number of polytheists are sort of the opinion that only their sort of pantheon or type of polytheism exists. For some clarification on what pantheons are, that would be like the Nordic pantheon, the Celtic pantheon, the Slavic pantheon. There's a lot of them. So there are hard polytheists who truly believe their pantheon is the only pantheon. But there are other hard polytheists who believe all these pantheons exist or more than one or something like that. But regardless, anyone who is a hard polytheist believes these entities are completely separate. They are not emanations. They do not sort of connect. They are separate beings. Now, the other view is what is called soft polytheism. And soft polytheism goes a number of ways, but the central idea is that they are not all completely separate. This can create a theology that is something like emanationism, or the idea that kind of all of these gods are emanating down from a single point, but they express differently. Or it could be an idea where they are sort of all one concept, but they're such different faces that they are distinguished. Or it could be an idea that maybe some gods are connected, like you get the idea of like a triple goddess where it's three goddesses that are one. Or you get ideas like, we always see people connecting gods from different pantheons and cultures as like calling them like associates or the same god, like all those are the same god. Or you can get a sort of view from the more, I would call it like less spiritual or less superstitious or more materialist type of pagan, where they believe there are all psychological archetypes that are all different versions of consciousness, right? Kind of a union perspective. But those are all soft polytheist positions. So if you believe the gods are linked, you're soft, but if you think they're separate, you're hard. And even within those, there are very different ways this is expressed, obviously. I'd say soft polytheism has a lot more sort of differences because soft polytheists come from a large variety of schools of thought. And you will see this critique leveled from hard polytheists at soft polytheists, that soft polytheists are fundamentally monotheist because they believe the gods are all different faces, though I would really disagree with that because they are, yes, they're different faces, but they're very distinguished, right? They're connected but distinguished. And so it can get a little complicated. It also gets weird when you get into polytheist positions that say there's a spark of divinity in everyone, or like there is no part of us that is not of the gods, which inherently implies a sort of connectedness between all things, but they're so distinguished, people will say there are different gods, even though everything is connected, which gets a little more complicated, as there are some beliefs that everything is the divine in some version. Now, another thing I want to touch upon is duotheism, which is the belief in two gods. This is most encapsulated by Wicca, because Wicca believes in a god and a goddess, and all the different gods are faces of the same god. All different goddesses are faces of the same goddess. So they have this hard polytheist take that they're two separate, distinct, but then this soft polytheist edge of all these goddesses and gods are faces of the same thing. And that is why you will see some Wiccan groups who have a specific god and goddess that they honor. Now, the next thing that we need to discuss is henotheism, or henotheism, however you want to pronounce it. You can do what you want. And that would be the idea that you believe in multiple gods, but you choose to only worship one. In the ancient world, this happened a lot. There were a lot of people who would specifically devote themselves to one god for various reasons. Or there were people who thought that one god is a supreme god. So there are some conceptions of polytheism where they have all these gods, but there is still a supreme god or a leader god within the pantheon who is the most important. And so a lot of people choose to only worship that god. Or you sort of get this idea, and this is, I guess, kind of the proto-monotheist idea, that one specific god is the good god, the just god, the righteous god, and the other gods are not good gods, but they still exist as gods. Then it gets really weird, because when we get into like early Christianity or early Judaism, you see ideas as you must worship me above all other gods, which does to some extent imply the other gods exist. And so in a sense, you can argue that's henotheism, or you can argue that that is saying that that one god is the only true god and the other gods are imposter spirits, which is another take. But fundamentally, you get this kind of weird, like in-between position that henotheism is, which even then henotheists believe different things. Some choose to just worship one god, and some see worshiping only one god of all the gods as the right thing to do. Now, let's get into the monotheist camp, because the monotheist camp is actually, once again, a house somewhat divided. Now, I want to make something very clear. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are not the only monotheistic religions. They're not. There are other monotheistic religions. They were not the first. The first monotheistic religion is Zoroastrianism, which some have argued is proto-Abrahamic, but fundamentally it's not Abrahamic. It has nothing to do with the lineage of Abraham. Now, you can get really weird when we talk about Abrahamic religions and argue that some of them are not as connected as they claim to be, but that's a whole different conversation, and I don't really want to get into that. Furthermore, you can also argue that the Abrahamic God is not one God, but multiple gods. There are a lot of theologians that have argued that I'm going to call the Jewish God Hashem, the Christian God Yahweh, and the Islamic God Allah are actually three different gods, or some have argued that exclusively Islam worships a different God. You're going to get different perspectives here, but there are people who do believe that the monotheistic religions are not worshiping the same God. I did a podcast about this forever ago. I think that there's a compelling case to say that perhaps they don't, but regardless, all those religions only recognize one God as the real God. But within these religions, you get these sort of things where people will break that God into subsects. And within Judaism, you get Kabbalah, which has this emanation view, that there are these emanations down from the beginning. And some other Jews have argued that that is heretical because that is arguing for a polytheism, where some Jews claim to that as the fundamental blood of their religion. And so that's a debate within Judaism. Within Christianity, there is the idea of the Trinity, that Father, Son, Holy Spirit are three parts and three aspects. Any Trinitarian Christian, which is a Christian that believes in the Trinity, will argue that that is still monotheism, but there are these people who are called non-Trinitarian Christians who do not believe in the Trinity, who consider that a corruption and breaking God into three. It's a little heretical to some, but it is a position, because interestingly, we often in the West define Christianity as people who adhere to what is called the Nicene Creed, but there are a lot of Christian denominations and beliefs that are non-Nicene. And that also brings me to Gnosticism, because I think Gnosticism needs to come up. Gnosticism is a very complicated lineage. I've done a video on it, but in short, the standard Gnostic position is that most modern Christians worship the demiurge. The demiurge is a false god that created this material world. But beyond the demiurge is the monad, the source, the one, the true god. And some add in Sophia, which is a sort of like feminine creator spirit. Some don't. There's debate within that. And so you get these people where most Gnostics would consider themselves monotheists, but they do kind of believe in two gods. They just consider the monad or the source the true God, but they still do believe in the second God who rules this material plane. And that is their explanation for why the material world is flawed and imperfect, that we were a reflection of a flawed creator, and we must break beyond this flawed creator to get with the true good, the highest good, the true creator. Now, this also gets a little complicated because a number of monotheistic religions believe that various prophets or messiahs will be sent at points in time as incarnations of these gods. Now, it is different depending on these religions. Christianity, obviously, you get Jesus. In Islam, there's ideas of like this sort of messiah figure coming back, and then Jesus is in Islam, but Jesus is really different in Islam. It's not the same way. So it can get really complicated. But not all monotheistic religions do believe in this whole like messiah thing or that the God can incarnate. And there are a number of polytheistic religions who do believe in this idea. There are even some polytheistic religions that believe at any given time certain gods are appeared, so that there's always like an incarnation of this god alive at any given point in time. So that's another interesting facet to it as well. Now, another thing that I think is really important to discuss is these monotheistic religions that sort of prioritize specific spirits but are still monotheistic. My brain immediately goes to the Yazidis. The Yazidis are the ones that I immediately think of. The Yazidis are a Middle Eastern religion that have been really persecuted because they get called like devil worshippers a lot. I don't think they're devil worshippers. I'll tell you guys who I think they worship. But they have this peacock angel, and then they believe still in like this monotheistic god. And the peacock angel, Melik Tau, is actually not their god, but many people think that they are kind of polytheists because they do very heavily like honor, and I would straight up say worship Melik Tau, but they also still believe in this god. And most Yazidis, if you speak with them or read what they say that they worship the same god that the Abrahamic religions do as well. Theologically, they're quite different, so I think that's debatable, but they do believe that. And what's interesting about Melik Tau is Melik Tau has been correlated with Jibril, which is the Arabic translation of Gabriel, and the form that Gabriel appears in Islam. So you get this kind of complicated thing where you see these monotheistic religions will have specific types where they uplift specific spirits that are not that main god. And that brings me to the idea of intercession. So within certain monotheistic faiths, there's this idea that certain lesser spirits can intercede. Intercede is where they it's explained in two ways. Either they act directly, or they, since they are a higher spirit, will pray directly to the monotheistic god, and the monotheistic god will pay extra attention to this, and then make your petition happen. Intercession can get into polytheistic territory very quickly, especially in certain forms. Now, this is one of the big divides within monotheistic religions, because there are a number of monotheists, specifically Protestant Christians, who believe that praying for intercession is a form of polytheism. It is putting sort of partners and companions with God. Whereas if you talk to a Catholic, they will say that intercession is a key part of their faith, right? These saints have specific magical graces. These angels have specific magical graces. And by working with them, you are doing the right thing and you're still a good monotheist. This is the thing about monotheists. Monotheists like to call each other polytheist all the time for everything they do. And as a polytheist, it drives me a little bit crazy. But another instance that I want to talk about with monotheists getting a little polytheistic is a very controversial thing called the Satanic Verses incident. That is one of the most polarizing religious topics in the world, but it's one that I think is really relevant here. So there is a Quran verse that basically what happens is, and this is the account of it that's controversial. I'm going to say the controversial account. It was that Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, he was born to a pagan family, a polytheist tribe. And at one point, he is just kind of saying this stuff, and he says, have you heard of Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat, the third idol besides? And then he is tempted by Iblis, the Islamic Satan or Shaitan, to say, verily, these are the most exalted females, or Ganarik, however you want to translate that. That translates to crane and female. And their intercession is to be hoped for. Now, this is a controversial debate within Islam whether this happened, but it was accepted for the first 300 years of the faith. Now, what this would mean is that basically what this is implying is Allah, the supreme god of Islam, could be interceded with from these three goddesses, Allat, Al-Uzza, and Al-Manat, which were believed to be the daughters of Allah in the pre-Islamic Arabian pagan religion. Now, this is disputed as to what have happened, or you could interpret this, if you don't want to take it as the idea that these polytheist gods could intercede under Allah, you could take it as he was tricked. But regardless, this is an idea of intercession, and this intercession is largely considered to be like a polytheist heresy. So that's a case where it's like, we got this intercession, but this intercession is now considered, once again, polytheism. Most polytheists also believe in a bunch of gods, but a number of them do believe in lesser spirits who can intercede. I think a lot of people think that the polytheist perspective on religion is that all spirits are gods, or at least some people online think this. Most polytheists don't believe that. A number of polytheistic religions have other spirits in their system, where they either will have like angels or jinn or fae or something like that. And in a number of these systems, those lesser spirits can still intercede and do things. Now, another thing that I wanted to discuss, and another sort of weird liminal place, is it's a heretical Christian grimoire called the Arbatel. The Arbatel of Magic is one of the most influential Western Christian grimoires. And the Arbatel of Magic presents a really interesting theological paradigm. And that is that there is the Christian god. It explains itself as a explicitly Christian grimoire, but there are also these Olympic spirits that represent all the planetary bodies. And these planetary body spirits you can work with directly, magically, and they can do things for you. But since they are considered under the Christian god, you honoring these spirits, which a number of the names are kind of very similar to polytheistic names, it's okay because you're seeing them as sort of inferior, lesser spirits. I've noticed a number of these people who really blend paganism and monotheism sort of have this perspective that the pagan gods exist, they're lesser spirits and they can intercede, which to some like more orthodox or rigid, orthodox not as in the denomination, though the orthodox denomination would think this too, as in like traditional Christians find this completely heretical, but there are a number of these sort of heretical Christians who do believe you can work with pagan gods so long as you see them as underneath the Christian god. And that brings me to the most wacky category of people, and that is the monotheistic, polytheist people who do both. The term, and the one that everyone hates, this is me attempting to do a drum roll, it's not a drum roll, the Christo-pagans, and the fact that they've existed historically, and that makes all of this a really weird debate and a really weird theological place. So there are these people who do what is called dual faith observance, where they honor two religions at once. And they work with both polytheistic gods and Christianity, specifically Catholicism. These people have had a rebound online with the whole folk Catholicism movement, but they've been around for a really long time. They're in a bunch of countries, and they do both. Santeria could arguably be put in this category, as they honor the Orishas, and they consider themselves good Catholics who go to church every Sunday. And they think what they're doing is cool and still Catholicism. A lot of Christo-pagans don't really call themselves Christo-pagans. They're also out in Russia, by the way. There's these groups called the Old Believers who mix Slavic paganism, esotericism, and Orthodox Christianity. So, you know, you get these people who kind of do both, and they've existed for a really, really long time, and most of them see it as theologically coherent. They have different arguments for it, but they do think that. So, yeah. Then it gets really complicated when we start talking about people who are atheist, but still follow a religion because they think it's good or they believe it in a psychological sense. Yeah, those people exist too. If you guys don't know this, there's a whole sect of people who are either pagans or Christians or Islamic or whatever that are literal atheists, but they do the religion because they think either it works on a psychological level and kind of like a, I don't know, like you can trick your mind and make your mind do things way, or they just do it for cultural reasons, but they still consider themselves part of that religion. Yeah, this all gets really complicated really quickly, doesn't it? Yeah. So maybe we should stop phrasing it as monotheism versus polytheism? It's a little complicated. I know. Also, I just want to say this. It's my sort of final note. This is for my monotheistic Abrahamic viewers. Pagans believe your God exists most of the time. Most pagans think your God is real. They just think you guys choose to be henotheist. I just see you guys as henotheist at the end of the day. So yeah, it's complicated. Don't really know what else to say besides religion is complicated. Anyways, I hope this gave you a little bit of clarity on whether you're a monotheist or a polytheist, or perhaps it gave you a lot more confusion. Even if it did that, I'm glad it got you thinking. Is that a positive outcome? I don't know. I think the joy of mysticism is that we are all driving ourselves a little bit crazy in search of divine truth, you know? That's kind of what we're all bonded on. So that's my video. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell, and you will never need to learn any of these terms again, and you can just live a normal life and not have to deal with any of this ever. Or if you want to learn more, you can find me on every social media platform ever. I'm literally on all of them. There's none that I'm not on. And if you want to support me, you should join my Patreon. My Patreon is how all of this is done. I have a bunch of tiers. You can get all my videos early. You can join my Telegram group where we all have like a big group chat. I talk in it all the time. You can do private consulting with me, where I will meet with you once a month to talk about your practice and give you advice and sort of guide you and mentor you. As well, I do these ritual guides, and that's really what most people like my Patreon for, where every month I release like a 20-page guide of a bunch of like rituals that I've written that you can literally just follow step by step. So yeah, I also host a podcast, The Postmodern Iconoclast. It's more cultural commentary than like education, but it is on this channel and it's on all the podcasting platforms. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right.